Good afternoon, bookworms and flyleafs. Welcome to this Friday's episode of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. I am your host, Fairy Princess Lolly, and today I am here with author Anita Shepherd. And of course, as you guys know, before we jump into all of the things, we will get our obligatory first things first out of the way. Like, subscribe, and tantalize the share button. It's November, and I figure we have good food that's coming on the way here in about 3 weeks. So all of our share button things should be about food and deliciousness. I don't know if that's going to stick, but that's where I'm at today. So also a shout out to today's sponsor, which is Heartsong Arts Pottery. And you know them, you love them. They have been our sponsor for many, many times. They've also been here on our show, and they were also one of our donating vendors to the silent auction at the Dumb Supper just this last weekend. Thank you so much to Heartsong for donating one of your fairy houses. But they are your favorite site for earth-themed, natural stained and glazed pottery in all kinds of varieties. They have mugs, planters, and you will find plenty to tempt you. Plates, all of it, they've got it. There is even a garden sculpture with totems and other fairy houses besides the one we got with statues, and you can really bring the fae to life in your everyday crockery. So they have free delivery on all orders that are $35 and more. Please go check them out. Information is in the low bar. You guys know how this works wherever you are watching from. So please go show Heartsong your love. Also, please forgive me if I'm doing a lot of drinking of the coffees and whatnots today. This whole week since Samhain, I've been talking and talking and talking and talking. So that is a thing. And with all of that said, though, I would like to give a lovely welcome to Anita. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You are most welcome. So if you will, a little bit, please just introduce yourself to our audience and tell us who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do here. I mean, we obviously know you write.
Yes, I do like to write. My name is Anita Shepherd, and I live and reside in Arizona. And in my pastime, I have become a writer, something that I didn't think that I actually would ever do. But I used to tutor some kids and wrote a play once, ended up being a dinner theater show, and there it went from there. It was put it into a book. So I started writing books. It became a 5-series book for children and family. And then ever since then, it just seems like it's been one more step each of the way. And it took me now to these 3 novellas of the Earth Chronicles series.
So how does writing that you actually engage in that much so prolifically, how do you constitute that as only your hobby? Like, it sounds like you do so much writing that it must be a full-time thing for you.
It's actually not. I actually have a full-time job in the meantime, and I also like to bake. So I'm baking, working, and writing all at the same time. So it's a passion. So I love to do it.
That is impressive, my lady. So today you're going to be reading to us from the Earth Chronicles. Did I say it correctly?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Tell us a little bit about that, if you will.
The Earth Chronicles?
Yes, like a little bit about, what we're going to be hearing from. I'm really excited to learn about this more because I know that you've had live events connected to the realm that you have built of Earthod. And so I sort of want to hear about what is this, and then what are these live events that are interlaced with what you've created. It sounds amazing.
Yeah. So what we do is we were inspired. It was myself and a group of close friends, and we were very inspired by the elves, just who they are, but more in the modern day, realizing that they're everywhere. Not necessarily may not be walking around with a set of ears, but they still have that same nature and the traits of the elves. So what we did is we created what we called the Universal Elven Society, and it's a group that you can join on Facebook, actually. And as you join, people
I'm there.
are given. The people are given, they give us their date of births and and then we place them in one of 5 elemental regions based on their date of birth and the stars. So that's actually how we came about writing the books as well, because with the books, we wanted to draw a huge community to bring in any modern day elf that was living out there, if you'd like to say that. But not only are they just the elves, we have druids, we had the Wiccans, and the book you'll also see there's witches and there's warlocks. And so with the festivals that we do, it's basically built around the whole elven society. People come from other states. They're given, we had little leaves. So if they were red, you're from the desert realm. We had yellow for the plains region. We have the mountain region, the woodland region, and then the ocean region, the coastal. So it ended up being a huge thing. We've had a couple festivals. We've been to Renaissance festivals. Usually I have the 5 enchantresses with me. They go with me to all the signings. And actually through the Universal Elven Society, that's also where we found our illustrator. So he was a member. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, he joined. His name's Victor Signs. He is our illustrator for the books. He usually will come with me as well to as many events as he can to sign the books with me. And that's it. We just went from there, and it has been a really exciting journey. Just out of all 3 books, we've actually been used the members' names from the group. Would ask them if you would like your name put into the books, so that way it gives them another connection to the stories, that they're not just part of a group on Facebook. They're actually can see their self in the books and follow along.
Which I know we have at least one friend that we've struck up mutually, Kane Hawkvale. I believe I have that correctly.
Yes.
He has come from your groups and joined several of our groups, and shares his lovely TikToks with us. I kind of I got addicted to watching them. Every time he shares them, I watch all of his TikToks. So they're great. I
know
them.
He's great. Yes. He is great. He is. We always tell him, we're like, Kane, you are our biggest fan, but he has a very big role in our books as well.
So, do you have trolls? We're being asked by Gunther, who is our resident troll. If he wants to know whether or not you have trolls in your books, and he says they're kind of like elves, except for taller, buffer, and have horns.
Unfortunately, we don't have any trolls.
See, room for expansion. There you go.
Yeah, there
room
we
for
go.
visiting other realms. Aha.
There we go.
Off to Trollheim you go. So, yeah, so this all sounds so cool, and someday I feel like I must cross over. Now, so what is, if I may, what is your role in your own realm that you have created? So you say that you already have your 5 enchantresses, etc. How do you envision yourself, there? Are you sort of just up above, or?
Yeah, I feel like in a way I'm in the background, kind of pulling all of their hidden secrets together and putting them on paper for the world to see. That's basically what it is, because the stories and the characters are actually written based upon what I know of them. So I used to love the saying of, I'm an author, be careful what you say, because it can and will be used against you in a book. That's basically how my life is with my friends. So
I like that. How do I get a part in one of these books? That sounds amazing. I wanted to share, if I could, if you don't mind. I think you sent me some photos of your illustrations.
Yes.
And so I was gonna pull one of those up just to show people kind of what is there to be seen. Let's see. This is it, right? It looks kind of like a V down there in the corner, so I assume
that's
that
his signature. Mm-hmm.
And this is just a kind of a pencil charcoal maybe looking drawing. It's
That's
great looking
actually,
though.
yeah, that's actually how all of his drawings are. He does his drawings by hand. Mm-hmm. And
It is
he's
a very good
he's
drawing.
amazing. That picture is actually the scene from the end of what I'll be reading today. So
Excellent. And what you are going to be reading today is The Uniting Call, which is the first of 3 in this Earth series. I'm
yes,
getting this correct? Yes.
yes.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about that and what we're going to be hearing from specifically.
So what I've done is I've taken a little bit of the prologue, the first chapter, and then the chapter of the battle scene that you just saw. It's kind of an introductory so that you can kind of get an idea of what's going on without me spilling the whole guts of the book out everywhere. So I just wanted to give you the background and then also want to leave you with a little bit so you can see what to kind of expect going forward in the other books.
Okay. Even though the questions normally come at the end, we are getting some questions already. So I'm just going to ask, and then we'll let you jump into the actual reading. Read the trilogy, fantastically written. I understand that the audio trailer is being produced. How soon before that is launched?
Yes, we are working on an audio trailer. So the audio trailer will be, it's kind of the beginning of a prologue. I don't have the actual launch date, but it will be soon. So you definitely don't want to miss that. But it is going to be amazing. I'm very excited to get it going. But we are working on that. And so hopefully that'll be soon.
So speaking of audio trailer, that implies some sort of media. Do you have a YouTube channel that everybody should go and have a little raid party on giving you some likes?
I don't have a YouTube channel yet, but that
Yes.
will be coming, obviously, with all of the audio trailers and so forth. Yes.
Excellent. Well, you'll have to pass it along to me so that we can share it with our folks. All right. So how do you feel about reading to us? Are you
I
ready?
feel good. I'm excited.
Okay, so everybody, here's how the next part of the show will go. I'll give her the full screen. I'll put myself on mute. She will be then reading to you live. And when she is done, I will be, well, while she's reading, I will be taking questions. I'll be in the audience with you guys in the chat, taking questions. And when she's done, we will pose to her the questions one by one, allowing her a chance to answer because we are kind and generous audience. And then at the very end of the show, we will be doing a drawing for a free copy of the book that we are hearing from today. So with that said, here you go, my lady. I'm going to put myself on mute and the screen will be all yours.
All right. Thank you.
It's okay, doggo. We love you.
Sorry. At one time, the universe was a living structure. Every planet, solar system, galaxy, and star lived in an abundance of light and was continually self-sustaining. There were 5 major planets that were most important because they fashioned the elements of nature. From these 5 planets, other smaller planets were derived all over the universe. There were beings who inhabited the universe at the time, the living elemental elves, or the Li. Full of light, energy, and life, they dwelled on the planets to maintain and nurture the elements for all to enjoy. The universe was home to many other beings as well, some who had developed their own way of controlling elements through magic, the witches, warlocks, and Wiccans. For eons of time, everyone lived in unison, but slowly the witches and warlocks began to develop great pride in their accomplishments. They believed themselves to be better than the Li, and were convinced in their minds that they should be the ones to rule over lands and elements within all the worlds. However, their spells altered the elements from their natural state into what they deemed more superior. The catastrophic changes caused the Li to intervene, but the witches and warlocks refused to comply with their orders and caused great strife between them. The Wiccans, however, stayed true to their calling and stood with the elves. The resentment taking hold within the witches and warlocks gave rise to jealousy, and they revolted against the elves and Wiccans. Thus, a mighty chaos war took place throughout the universe. Life began to be destroyed upon planets, and the blasts from the battle created deep scars within the stratums of the cosmos. It seemed as if the war would be lost by the Elves and Wiccans. However, another group of beings that hailed from worlds within worlds came to their aid, the Druids. The Druids were warriors who stood for truth and honor. They helped turn the tide of the war, but the damage to the universe was already done. In an effort to preserve the original state of the cosmos, the Elves, Druids, and Wiccans compelled the war to one location in order to trap the darkness. On the east side of the universe, a planet had not been damaged yet, and all of the elements were still working in harmony. Its name was Earthod. There was no habitation outside of nature and its animals on Earthod. So the Druids, Elves, and Wiccans drove the witches and warlocks to one spot within the darkest, coldest part of the world, the dark crystal caverns. Reserved for all the evil darkness, it was a place of desolation, a dungeon beneath the surface. Known now as the Abandoned Ones, they were banished to spend their lifetimes exiled from the light of the living for their rebellion against the League. The war had a devastating impact on the lives of those who fought, and many were lost to its grueling combat. Once established on Earthod, a great council was held and a pact was made between the remaining Elves, Druids, and Wiccans. The society of the universe would live on in this world, everyone dedicated to their own purpose and station. There were 5 princesses among the High Elven Elders who were appointed rulers of the elemental regions on Earthod to maintain the virtue of the lands. 1 enchantress for each element. Erithron of metal for the mountain realm, Alora of wood for the forest realm, Valentia of land for the plains realm, Noreen of fire for the desert realm, and Oceana of water for the coastal realm. On Earthod, the enchantresses ruled the elemental realms with their Mimin, or High Protector, by their side. It was a time of agreed peace. Now, by agreed peace, it means that as long as the Elves stayed within their elemental regions, there would be no hostilities among them. One might ask why there was such disharmony. Some would say it was caused by their constant disputing regarding which element was more powerful. At one time, they all worked in unity with no divisions. But since their arrival and control on Earthod, they lost sight of the importance of their roles within the world. The competitive nature among the Elves reflected in the elemental regions they were entrusted to rule over. Common ground was never found among them, and it was decided all would be best if left to tend after itself as separate regions. It wasn't perfect, but it worked for the most part. The Druid domain of Ringastal on Earthod was situated within a valley that was only reached by passing through the gates of Marana. Not just anyone could pass through the gates to reach the Druid kingdom, however, for they revealed the intent of the heart and mind. If proven worthy and favorable, the gates would be forgiving and allow passage. But if proven to hold wickedness within the bowels of the soul, the gates would send one to his or her fate of damnation. The Elves and Druids had no dealings with each other and kept to their own, as it was against sacred laws within both circles to mix outside of the bloodlines. But one day, a child was conceived of an elf prince named Tolgan and a Druid virgin priestess, Rhea. Their union, of course, caused great discord among the two groups. Tolgan was stripped of his honor and banished to the dark crystal caverns. Rhea was sent to isolation in the Druid temple to have the child. It was a girl. The Druids vowed to offer the baby as a sacrifice for Rhea's iniquity, and so the child was placed upon a flat stone on the edge of the forest that bordered a wide, open plain where she was left to suffer her fate. Rhea's contempt for the Druids' decision regarding her child drove her away, and she was never seen again. However, another domain was established on Earthod. It was the Wiccans. And on the fateful night of Rhea's baby being placed for sacrifice, a ceremony was underway in the nearby Wiccan village of Shane. Supernaturally, They were led to the baby by a spark from their fire. They could see that the child was an elf by her ears. However, when the spark landed on the baby's arm, it revealed a birthmark of Druid lineage. They took the child in among them to raise her until her path was revealed. They named her Asvoria. Asvoria grew and came to know that her lineage was mixed between the Elves and the Druids. Beyond that, there was nothing that could be told to her except how she was found. Over time, she was imparted with visions, and the Wiccans were very attentive to her gift to help her cultivate it for the purpose she had. As she mastered and became one with her calling, Asvoria's visions began to lead her to provide advisory messages to the 5 Elven realms and the Druids. She was never seen by them, however, as the Wiccans had a private messenger named Tavel to relay the visions on her behalf. He had mastered the flight of travel through a portal that he created that allowed him to move quickly to the realms. Tavel would meet with the Mimins and the Enchantresses, and with Skylar, the revered Druid Ovat, esteemed as the solitary one, for he was often found alone, having dedicated his life to the prophecies revealed to him. Her visions were always welcomed as they guided the Elves and Druids with forewarnings through difficult occurrences among them. But what Asvoria didn't know yet was that her path was one of an even greater destiny, for it was she who held the very prominent and important position of connecting the Elves to the Druids in a soon-to-be-revealed time of trouble. On one particularly clear night, the air was unusually still as Asvoria sat down at her favorite spot in the woods. As she studied the stars, she had a most disturbing vision of a great battle. She saw the 5 Elven realms surrounded by a large army comprised of groups that she had never seen before. They were terrible to look upon, gray and deathly. There seemed to be 3 divisions, led by what looked like elves, but these elves were dark and fierce, nothing like the elves Asvoria had known of in Earthod. The army closed in around the elves, and she cried out, pulling herself from the vision. It took a second for her to remember where she was, her heart beating rapidly. She sat still and looked around her into the night. She wondered when the vision would take place, if it would be soon. Asvoria walked slowly back to the village and sat down by the central fire. It was custom for her to go here after she saw a vision, while others would gather to listen. But tonight, she was silent, and it was apparent to those nearby that something was wrong. Asvoria, a gentle voice called her out of her thoughts. She glanced up and saw Esme looking at her with concern. Esme had been the closest thing to a mother for Asvoria, and the only one in whom she could confide in. Tonight, however, she didn't have the words to describe what she saw. Esme sat down next to her and took her hand. What did the vision show you tonight? Asvoria quietly studied Esme's face. Her weathered skin and caring eyes stared back at Asvoria expectantly. Returning her gaze back to the fire, she looked around and noticed that others had gathered to hear. The crackling from the fire seemed to hush itself in an effort to receive what she was going to say. She took a deep breath. I saw a great and dreadful battle. The 5 Elven realms were surrounded by a deathly and evil assembly of beings that seemed to look like elves. The others among them were groups that I haven't seen before. These others, Esme started. Can you tell us anything more about them? Asvoria thought back to the details. They wore a mark on their foreheads. There was a quiet gasping that went through the air from the group. Asvoria looked at Esme. What does it mean? Who are they? These are the abandoned ones, the evil witches and warlocks that always plague the spirit world that we are mingled with, replied Esme with uneasiness. They dwell in the dark crystal caverns. For many years they have been silent among the spirits, but we didn't know why. We knew they must be conjuring something, and we have used this space of time to do what we could to do good. It was during this time that we found you. A deep voice from across the fire spoke. You must tell the Elven Enchantresses. It was Mirrodin, a quiet but strong Wiccan esteemed by the village. He would oftentimes come to the fire to hear Asvoria's visions, but would never say anything. So tonight when he spoke, it was a notable alarm. Asvoria's voice trembled timidly as she responded, "How can I speak this evil vision of doom to the elves without offering a recourse of help?" She looked around the fire and asked, "Will you aid them in this battle?" There was silence as everyone just stared at the fire. It was almost as if no one heard what she had asked. "We don't fight outside the spirit world," Esme finally stated as she broke the silence. "But the marked witches and warlocks are of the spirit world," Asvoria implored. "You said that yourself." "Yes," Esme replied, "but we can't help the elves in this world." Mirrodin stood up, and as he turned to walk away, he replied, "You know the ones who can help." Asvoria sat in silence for a second, frantically thinking of someone who would go to the elves' aid, and then knew of whom he spoke. "The Druids?" she whispered intently, with a furrowed brow. As she looked up, she noticed Mirrodin was no longer there, as well as others who had took their leave of the fire. She felt Esme stand up and quickly grabbed her hand. Esme gazed down at her with pitying eyes. "How can I convince the Druids to stand by the elves?" Asvoria questioned. "I don't know what to say to them. You know as well as I that they have no dealings with each other. Would they yet go into battle together because I come with a vision?" Esme gave her a sad but encouraging smile. "Don't forget who you are, Asvoria," she coaxed. "It is your destiny." Asvoria shook her head in frustration. "Ugh, my destiny!" She stood up in exasperation, throwing her arms in the air, and began to pace by the fire. "What does my destiny have to do with this horrid battle about to take place?" Esme walked over to her. "Why do you like viewing the stars so much, Asvoria?" Esme asked as she adjusted the edging of Asvoria's cape around her shoulders. "I've always been drawn to them," Asvoria answered, looking up at the night sky. "There's something about them and the universe. I feel they're trying to tell me a story." "Yes," Esme said as she lifted her eyes up to the stars. "There is a great story. What you see is the after effects of another great battle that took place a long time ago." Asvoria studied Esme curiously and asked, "A battle long ago? Between who? The elves?" Esme returned her gaze to the fire, nodding her head. "And others." "Did the Wiccans fight?" Asvoria probed further, coming in closer to Esme. Esme drew in a soft breath, answering, "Yes, and we thought we did everything we could to keep another battle from happening," Esme replied, "but it would seem as if what we did wasn't enough." "How did you think you resolved another battle from happening?" Asvoria inquired. Esme looked at her. "We drove all the evil into one place below the surface, banishing them from the light. It was to be their prison until they all died off, never to be seen again." Asvoria's eyes squinted as her eyebrows scrunched towards each other, her frustration turning into resentfulness. "If the Wiccans fought then, why not fight now?" Asvoria prodded. "I don't understand. It seems as if you should be taking part in this." "Our part of your journey here on Earthod was to take you in and nurture you until your appointed time of purpose," Esme explained. "The Wiccans all knew this. Now your purpose is laid out in front of you. You must heed to it." Esme cupped Asvoria's hand in hers. "You must go." Asvoria dropped her head a little as she slowly understood what Esme was saying. "You're telling me that my time among the Wiccans has come to an end." "I'll have Tavel come to you," Esme said as she released Asvoria's hand and walked away. Asvoria was left alone by the fire. Her thoughts raced inside her tired mind of how she was to take on this great task. "It's my destiny," she thought to herself and sat down on a log. "Well," she spoke aloud to herself, the fire being her only audience, "if it is my destiny and purpose, then it will be accomplished." She raised her face up at the stars, closed her eyes, and said a silent prayer for strength and guidance. She didn't hear the approaching footsteps, but suddenly felt a presence nearby. Opening her eyes, she saw Mirrodin standing in front of her. He spoke in a low but confident tone. His dark hair laid across his shoulders. "I've brought you something," he said as he extended his hand. Asvoria stood up to receive his offering. Mirrodin dropped a white stone in her hand, saying, "The white moonstone carries the energy of the new moon at its height." "It's beautiful," Asvoria said in awe as she held it up to the moonlight. The pearly veil of the stone seemed to open up to the light, reflecting its silvery white line across the surface. "It's as if it holds a mystery." "Yes," Mirrodin replied. "Its secrets are locked within, as with your own inward journey, Asvoria." Asvoria looked at him as he continued, "And with your own light, those secrets have been brought to the surface to serve their purpose." Mirrodin turned to go, and she watched as his broad stature disappeared, remembering what he said. "The white moonstone carries the energy of the new moon at its height." She looked again at the moonstone and then up at the moon. 4 days until the new moon," she said aloud. "My 18th birthday." "Asvoria!" A familiar voice sounded behind her. It was Tavel. His modest stature and long brown hair would be an engraved memory in her mind. She smiled at him. "I guess this will be our last mission together," she spoke kindly. "Although you'll be going to the Enchantresses and I'll be traveling alone for my first time to the Druid Kingdom. I will deliver this one last message with as much honor as I have delivered all the others," Tavel pledged. Returning the grin, he gave her a folded paper. "You'll need this." It was a map to the Druid Kingdom. "I figured since you'd never been there before, it might be helpful to know where you're going," Tavel advocated. "Yes, well, I guess the best place to have everyone gather would be where all the regions converge," Asvoria said. "So just let them each know to meet me at the waterfall of Palok by tomorrow's sunset." Tavel nodded, turned around, and departed through the portal of his flight of travel. She surveyed the village of what she could make out by the light of the fire. Pulling the hood of her cloak over her head, she started on the passage towards the Druid Kingdom. And so began the next phase of her journey. And now I'm going to skip ahead. This is in between here, and this is going over to the waterfall of Palok. So a lot has happened between Tavel's travel to the Elven regions and Asvoria's journey to Ringastal. But I won't give you any of that information. You'll have to experience that on your own. So why don't we start first with Asvoria telling us why she called this meeting, Skylar suggested. "Well," Asvoria began, adjusting her hood to make sure her elven trait wasn't seen, "I had a disturbing vision that I thought best if I met with you in person about. The vision revealed a great battle that will take place. In my vision, the elves were surrounded by dark, evil beings. I've never seen these beings before, but I am told that they are evil witches and warlocks." The enchantresses exchanged an uneasy look between them. Asvoria continued, "There's more. Some of the beings also looked like elves." "Elves?" Dolu repeated doubtfully. "Why would there be elves among the darkness?" "I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that question," Asvoria replied, "but I've called upon Skylar to entreat the Druids to help fight this battle with you." "Are the Druids going to help us, even though it is not your battle?" Loreen probed Skylar. Skylar spoke carefully. "I haven't met with them yet. I came here with Asvoria to meet with you all first. But the one question I have is, why would Asvoria see elves with the evil witches and warlocks? Is it possible that our own kin could turn against us?" Valentia asked in disbelief. "If I may," Erithron interrupted, "I'd like Luthien to explain what she saw in my region." Luthien bowed her head towards everyone as she started. "Today, as I walked through the corridor of Ofunar, I saw Tavel about to leave. As he stepped forward in his flight of travel, he flew backwards. I saw..." She stopped and looked at Erithron, who gestured for her to continue. "I saw someone standing in the portal entrance." "Who did you see?" Oceana asked intently. "I believe it was the one we had banished from the mountain region," Luthien finished. All eyes went to Erathron for further explanation, and she began to explain. This elf was a powerful prince of the Highlands. However, he was found to have broken a sacred law, which could not be forgiven. He pleaded to have the law changed, and when he saw that we were unbending in our decision, his heart had turned dark against us. Erathron stole a quick glance at Skylar, wondering if he knew of whom she spoke. Skylar only returned her stare with a grave gaze. How long ago was this? What became of him? Noreen questioned. Erathron took a deep breath and replied, We banished him to the dark crystal caverns about 18 years ago. Everyone was looking at each other, trying to take it all in, but glances towards Skylar were being returned void. Wait, Reef shook his head and asked fervently, staring into Erathron's eyes, You banished an elven prince to the dark crystal caverns? Yes, Erathron sighed. We had no other way to punish his dark heart. But you placed him among those who have the ability to cause it to grow, Alora stated. Well, that explains one elf, Oceana said, but Asvoria, you said you saw elves in your vision. Asvoria nodded and said, It would seem that there must be a plan to recruit more for the cause. What was the banished elf's name? Skylar inquired, looking intently at Erathron. Erathron was about to answer, but a strong wind blew into the area and all could feel a chill run through their senses. A strange feeling came upon them, and their thoughts were immediately distracted by unfamiliar emotions. It's the darkness, Valentia exclaimed, and all armies stood in battle formation around the area. Asvoria and Tavel started to speak a spell of protection, but all the Mimins and Tavel were suddenly thrown from the surrounding area, and an invisible barrier separated them from the enchantresses, Asvoria and Skylar, who were trapped on the inside. They could see and hear each other through the barrier, but it was like an unseen chasm created by an unknown power was keeping them apart. Dark figures began to sporadically appear all around the armies. As they struggled to fight, they found themselves warring against formless beings as if there were nothing but air. However, they could feel the cold stings of their skin each time a being appeared. Not knowing which direction the enemy was coming from, they started to become disoriented. Tavel, Reef called out, can you break through this barrier? We need to get to the enchantresses. Tavel moved as close as he could get to Asvoria, and they began an incantation in order to break the invisible obstruction. Skylar watched the enchantresses intently as they held their heads, fighting internal battles inside their minds. He could see the light in their eyes fading, and quickly he took his staff and struck at the impediment. However, it only seemed to awaken more of the darkness now filling the enchantresses' minds, and the vibration was as a siren in their ears. Although there was no audible sound, they could all hear the deafening effect within. We must come together, Alora instructed. The enchantresses tried to grab each other's hands, but it was as if they were being pulled apart by indiscernible chains. All each of them could do or see before their minds was dark images of fear and sadness. It was like a force driving them to turn away from each other. They called to one another in great effort to hold each other's hands, and when they were finally able to fully embrace, a light shined around them, pushing back the oppressive force that was attacking their minds, but they were still trapped within the barrier. Asvoria and Tavel kept repeating the spell over and over, trying to break through. Finally, they were able to open a small portal between them, thinking that they had made a way for victory, but it did not work, as they had hoped. A tall, dark, masculine figure stepped through and spoke Asvoria's name. Instantly, she became limp and fell to the ground. Skylar ran to her and aimed his staff toward the dark figure, who vanished as quickly as he had appeared. The portal closed, but the unseen enclosure remained intact. Knowing that there was nothing more they could do at this point, he lifted his staff in the air and cried, Nask Mahil, I summon you! A rumbling noise like thunder went out over the entire region. Great whooshing sounds were heard as the wind began to take the shape of eagles. The wind was so strong, all the armies kneeled down below to brace themselves. The eagles of wind gathered overhead and dove toward the invisible shield with one mighty force. Everything and everyone outside the barrier was blasted backward. Instantly, There was silence. The wind had stopped. The evil beings ended their attacks. The barrier had diminished, but Asvoria still lay lifeless in Skylar's arms. The enchantresses ran over to her as Tavil and the Mimins attempted to regain their strength. What happened to her? Doreen asked. Tavil explained as he reached Asvoria's side and kneeled down. A dark figure emerged from the portal we opened. I heard it speak her name. Then she just went limp. Skylar leaned close to her and spoke her name. Asvoria opened her eyes as he helped her sit up, but she was in a tranced state. Her hood fell back from her head, revealing her elven ears. She's an elf, Valentia whispered in astonishment. From where, though? Alora questioned. I thought she was associated with the Wiccans. I'll take Asvoria to my healer, Skylar announced, and looked at Tavil. She'll be safe there until we can gather back together. Oceana interrupted. Wait, we need to know more about how she is an elf. What is going on? Skylar gently placed Asvoria on his horse and began to lead the astonished group. I suggest you all start planning for war, he said. I fear this was just a foreshadowing of what's to come.
All right. Hello, I am back.
Hi.
I assume this is our pause point.
Yes.
Very good. All right. So we do have a few questions. Give me just a second. And we will get those out for you. Now, that was really quite good. And the music was lovely. I'm so glad you had that.
Oh, good.
So we did have, Newt asked us again whether or not the characters in your books were inspired by the people in your group. And the answer to that was yes, which, because you answered that early on, but he may not have been here for the beginning of the show. So I do have that correct. Let's see. Is your group related to the Universal Elven Calendar from
Yes.
Ruben?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So we have an Elven Calendar. It's from the Universal Elven Society that we put out every year. And we ask for submissions from members of the group or however far that we would like to submit their images. And it's a Elven Calendar. It's available. It's a wonderful thing every year. And the images inside are of all Elven members or whoever dressed up as elves. And it's a completely, yes, there you go. That's it. That's it.
It hangs right next to my desk. Yay.
Awesome.
I know that some of our fae are actually in last year's calendar. Hopefully we'll be in this year's calendar too.
Yes.
So if everybody wants to just whoop.
Yes, it's beautiful. I buy one all the time too, and I use them.
I have a calendar obsession. It's so I actually have 4 calendars hanging next to me because that's the best way for me to be able to tell what's going on. Time and I have an argument with each other. We don't get along very well, so this is the best I can mitigate it. So where would people go to get the calendar for 2022?
So you can go to they're available on lulupublishing.com. I know that that's one area to go to. Otherwise, if you go to our group, it's also listed there within posts that we have to show that you can just click the link and it'll take you exactly where you need to go to order it.
Perfect. Okay, your Facebook group, that is.
Yes.
Let's see. We have okay, here's one. What is a significant way that your book has changed since the rough draft or the initial planning?
Went through quite a few edits. The main thing is, the main change, honestly, is when you're writing it first off. And then for me, when I went back to add the characters from the group, because we wanted to input them, as far as it changing, it didn't change a whole lot from the rough draft as far as the storyline. But the main thing is just adding the characters and wanting to allow people to have them see them for what they see in their minds rather than me putting out all the details. My books are very simple worded. They're not too much detail because I do like to leave a lot to one's imagination. But I guess that would be the biggest change, is just when I go back to implement the actual characters and their names and their settings and their backgrounds.
Adding that in, and do you ever come into hurdles where doing something like that creates a very difficult conflict with what you already have that you have to figure out how to unravel and weave in?
Yeah, sometimes, because you can't just mention a character and then just leave them out there hanging. You also have to then bring them in later on in the book somewhere. So, yeah.
I had a friend. It's funny that you say that, because I'm like, oh, I would struggle with that, right? Like, there you are, like, now halfway through book 2, and you're like, what happened to that person in chapter 2
Where'd they
of book
go?
1, you know?
Yes.
I had a friend who, it's kind of related, because it makes me think it would be so cool if maybe you did something like this, because this question here made me wonder what your plans for future books are. But I had a friend who went through all of the Harry Potter books and looked for exactly the loose ends that you're talking about, where something was mentioned once and then never elaborated on again. And then they ran a Harry Potter gaming campaign based on all the loose ends. Right.
Wow.
So it was all the stuff that nobody paid attention to or whatever. And then all these elaborate stories that they built on all these just dead end
cool.
kind of. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that would be like
That's creative.
Yeah. But it would be sort of like doing extended universe a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like if you took your characters and did little extended universe novellas or something, that would be fun.
Yeah.
So how that circles back to you, though, do you have plans for the future?
Yeah, and it's funny that you asked me that, because I get a lot of requests for how about this one, or how about before they ever got to Earth Thought, and how about a book of each region or each enchantress or each. So there's a lot of ideas that are out there, a lot of avenues that I could take. So I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot that's brewing. So especially the main one that we're going to do, obviously, is what we just talked about earlier, was the audio trailer, which I'm very excited for, to start that. So maybe move into an audiobook version.
Okay, let's see. Here we have. I'm looking at the time to make sure that we don't. Do you pumpkin at 3:00? Poof, or is it okay if we go over a little bit?
No, it's okay.
Okay, what are some of the other authors / creators that have inspired your writing?
So I do have to say, the J.K. Rowling has been one of the major ones. Her, and what I thought was interesting the most about her was how she can pull in the characters in such a way that you're not just thinking only about them at that specific time, but you actually throw yourself in your memory or your mind to I wonder what's going to happen to them later. Or I wonder what, and she's very inspiring and creative in how she writes. So she was a major one.
Oh, excuse me. I'm about to choke here. Thank you. And let's see. How about what book scene was the most difficult for you to write, and why?
I would have to say it was actually the part that I read with the battle. That little battle right there at the waterfall of Paluk, only because I never knew how hard it was to write a battle, because you can see it playing out in your mind, but to put what you're seeing on that paper so everybody else can actually see it is a whole other world. And so for me to write conversations between people, that's one thing, but to write and describe a battle and what people are feeling in that battle that was probably the most difficult.
Is it because you yourself, like, what I'm curious a little bit about this. I know other people who have done battle writing, and it seems that in the realm of authorship, battle writing is sort of its own its own unique skill and technique, right? With
Yeah.
knowing how to keep the pacing in the battle, knowing how weapons actually work or would
Yeah.
work when they're
Mm-hmm.
used. So did you have to go down a rabbit hole of study for these kinds of things? Since, what was that like?
Well, I think the main thing that I had to do was not focus so much on what the person had in their hand as much as, so it, like in that whole scene, it was more magical, I guess you could say, more fantasy rather than swords clanging and arrows flying and fist hitting, and it was more on the fantasy side, the spiritual world of it.
Right.
So I went down that rabbit hole instead. I steered away from the physical part of it and went down the other way, and that's kind of where I went.
So a couple more questions, and before we get to those, you guys, now is the time to put your name into the comments section if you would like to be entered onto the Wheel of Win to get a copy of this book. When we're done with these next couple questions here, we will then do the drawing on the wheel. So put your name into the comments now. Let's see. We have you ever promoted at Comic Cons or cosplay events?
Yes. We've been to a few Comic Cons and fan fests. We've also been to Renaissance festivals where we've sold and signed and autographed and books. And those are the most, I guess you could say those are the funnest ones that we've been to. The Phoenix Comic Con, we've been to a New Mexico Comic Con where we saw Jason Momoa. And we went to the Fan Fest here in Phoenix, and the Renaissance Festival up in northern Arizona, and then of course the festivals that we hold ourselves. So yes, and it's very exciting to get out there among the people and have your pictures taken with them and see the excitement and get to express, the books.
Yeah, definitely. So the last question is just from me. So thank you, Jesse, for your question. Last question is just from me, and I see everybody's getting their names here in the comments. So I was listening to as you were reading this, and I noticed that in the very beginning, the elements that you were describing, the elemental regions over which the elves preside, two of them are the mountain region, which has the element of iron, and I think the forest region, which was the element of wood. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And I was interested by this because those are Eastern, like classical Eastern elemental, on their the chart of elements, I guess, if you will, as opposed to the Western chart of elements, which tends to be earth, air, fire, water. Eastern philosophies include metal and wood specifically. And in Western European, especially lore around elves and fae and whatnot, metal is, in some interpretations, a taboo, iron specifically, poisonous or whatever. Do you work in actual folklore, from like historical folklore, or are you looking to blend things? Like, how does that play into the realm that you have invented?
It's actually just the element itself. And that element can be obviously wielded good or bad, depending on how, the person that's using it, which obviously happened in this, all elements itself is of a natural source. So whether it's Eastern or Western or folklore or whatever, to me, the elements are exactly what they are. And within the book and the story itself, the enchantresses, and you'll see it when you read it, they learn to use them in ways that they don't just reside over them and they don't just use them. It's like they're one with them. So like the fire the fire is used in the metal, and they can have them move and do what they want according to what they need. So
okay. Well, I am going to now pull up our wheel here. I know that was a kind of a complicated question, but thank you so much for answering. Let's see. Where is my wheel of wind? All right, so I have a couple names to add here. And then are there any more that I see out there? Not that I am seeing in my coming through here. So with that said, then we will go ahead and submit. And this is for a copy of what we just heard today for the Earth Chronicles. Congratulations, you are the winner for today. Yay, Poppy will be excited for that. So one of our Patreon patrons. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. Is there anything that you would like to say before we let you go this afternoon?
This was such an enjoyable experience, and I really did enjoy it. And I hope everyone enjoyed the reading and hearing of the story. And hope you enjoy the books and go out and buy them.
Yes, absolutely. And I look forward to hearing about any of your live events. I feel like we should bring a fairy contingent down to your live events and, build bridges. That would be amazing. Yes. I would love that so much. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, you guys. It is Friday, and so we will see you back here again next Wednesday for Fae News at 7:30 p.m. Please hit the like and subscribe button and check out the Earth Chronicles. Also, remember, if you purchase the books, please leave a review. It really super helps indie authors if you do that. And with everything said, have an awesome weekend, you guys, and hope everybody had a wonderful Halloween. So we will see you all anon. As they say. Yes.
Hello, friends. This is Gunther Hammerhands. Thank you for checking out Fairy Princess Lolly's channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. Use your troll hammer to ring that little bell icon to get notifications when she posts future videos. And if you'd like to support these magical creations, fly over to